So my name's Simon Allaby, and as a Christian author, I've been writing short stories for probably 15, 20 years. And the idea of the stories is just to try and connect people with the gospel, because I think most people have moments where they think there must be more to life than this, but life is so busy, people don't, the moment moves on before they've really thought about the kind of issue that they're thinking about. And so I write these very short stories just to try and give people a moment to pause and think, oh, maybe the more that I'm looking for looks like this. So they're just short stories that point people to Jesus and help people to think a bit more seriously about the Christian faith. So I started, the writing came out of writing these little stories for broadcast on Christian radio stations, and then eventually it sort of morphed into putting them into books so that people could read them. Yeah, they're very short books. I've written quite a lot of them. So the first one that I wrote, which isn't in print at the moment, it was 28 of the stories that were first broadcast on radio, and the book was called My Dog Ate the Sponge Buns, because I did have a dog who ate my children's sponge buns, and that was a little story about self-control. So and we printed that book and handed it out to commuters at the local railway station as something to read on the train into London. And then I kept doing them as short radio broadcasts. And then the books really started out of lockdown. In lockdown, I did an online advent calendar on Facebook. So I did 25 short stories. And then after that, someone said, have you got this as a book? And I didn't. So the first book after My Dog Ate the Sponge Buns was a book for Advent and Christmas called What Are You Waiting For? And they're just 25 stories provoking people to think about, well, what is Christmas about? Why do we celebrate? What's the heart of it? So, and in the books, there's a short story, there's an illustration, usually there's just a Bible verse or two, and then there's a question for reflection. And as the books go through, there's a sort of progression. So they start with just provoking people to think a bit more, and then sort of as the book goes on, sort of pointing people towards Jesus, and then by the end of the book giving people an opportunity to make some kind of response. So that's the sort of pattern in all of them. So we did the Christmas one, what are you waiting for? And I thought, well, I've done one for Christmas, maybe I could do one for Easter. So we did an Easter book of 15 stories called The Man on the Cross, because I remember years ago I had a friend who went into a jeweller's to get his watch fixed, and there was a customer in front of him buying a cross pendant, and the salesperson said, do you want a plain one or one with a little man on it? And clearly neither of them had any idea who the little man was or what he was doing on the cross. So that book is just kind of exploring, well, who was this Jesus, and why did he die, and what was his death, what was it all about? So that was The Man on the Cross. And then the next one was a book for Remembrance Sunday called Greater Love. So that's, just 12 stories about, they're all stories from First or Second World War or more recent conflicts. But what I do with each of the stories is just to take something that people may be familiar with or a story from history and use it to say something about the gospel. So that book is all about sacrifice and serving others, which very obviously leads into pointing towards Jesus and his ultimate sacrifice. And that one's been used quite widely, and it was translated into Ukrainian a couple of years ago, used with the Ukrainian military. And I'm about to rewrite it and repurpose it for another charity, Naval and Military Bible Society, because they want to use that one. So I did the Greater Love one, and then the next one I did one for, it's sort of not tied to Father's Day, but it was aimed at Blokes. So it's called Under the Bonnet, and they're 12 car-themed stories. And the purpose of that book is, blokes are not very good at talking to each other or sharing emotion, and blokes generally sort of bottle things up and don't talk about stuff. So it's a book about what makes you tick, and where do you find help when you're struggling. So that was the next one. And then a friend of mine years ago had this little thing about working smarter, not harder. And he said as he gets older, he wants to have more impact as he has less energy. So his thing is, how can I work smarter, not harder? And that stuck in my head. And I realised, because I sort of self-publish, and the issue with self-publishing is always distribution. So I thought, if I could write books for other people who are working in a particular sector, then they can handle the distribution. So I've done a couple of books for the Daylight Christian Prison Trust in the last 2 or 3 years. I did a book 3 years ago to celebrate their 20th anniversary, so I had 20 stories in. And the book's called Let's Start From Here. So it's a book about, we all have a past, and sometimes our future is determined by our past, but actually, God says, let's start from here. So it's a book all about hope. And then I did another book for them called We Had Hoped, which interestingly, they wanted a book of stories from Ascension to Pentecost to go into prisons. So I did that one for Daylight Christian Prison Trust, and I still do a little bit of writing for them occasionally, writing Bible studies and things. So that's those two. And then I wrote a book called The Word on the Street for a homeless charity down in Brighton and Hove, but it's written in such a way that any homeless charity can use it. Any church that has a ministry amongst the homeless can take it, and we wrote it so there's space at the back for putting in your kind of local details and contacts. And we made that one, it's bright yellow because it's being handed out on the streets, so we wanted it to kind of show up. So that's so that's The Word on the Street. And then I've just literally just last week finished a book for Naval and Military Bible Society called All Aboard. So they're 12 naval themed stories, and that will be distributed to they work with the military but also merchant seamen, so that book will be distributed wherever they're at work. And then there's next one in the pipeline is one for rural missions. So it's 12 stories about the countryside and farming and all of that kind of stuff. So that's the base of the books, and they all, as I say, have a kind of a similar kind of format in that there's a short story, a picture, a Bible verse, a question for reflection, and they kind of start with provoking questions and thoughts, and then lead people to a point where if they want to take things further, they can. So there's always a prayer of commitment at the back of the book, so if someone wants to make a commitment to Christ, they can do that, and then there's sort of contact details for getting in touch with people who can kind of follow up. So that's kind of the books. As I say, it sort of started just with doing them for radio, and then morphed into a Facebook advent calendar, and then morphed into books, and I sort of keep getting ideas for different books and suggesting to people would they like me to write a book, and graciously sometimes they say yes. So my inspiration comes from I think it's the way my brain is wired, that I'm like a kind of magpie for ideas. So I'll just hear something or see something, and then in my brain I'll think, I can connect that with the gospel. I can use that to say something about the gospel, and I'm just doing that all the time. So often they're things that are in the news, and I have a Facebook page, and often on the I do a story every week for my Facebook page, and often there'll be things that I've noticed in the news. But sometimes they're movies. I love going to movies, so often I'll pick things out of movies, and just use them to say something about the gospel. So there's I think one of the stories in Greater Love is it's from the film Saving Private Ryan, and there's a scene towards the end of the film where Captain Miller, who's been sent to rescue Private Ryan, has been mortally wounded, and his dying words to Ryan are, earn it. In other words, a sacrifice has been paid for you, and now you need to work really hard to earn it and deserve it. And the final scene in the film is Ryan as an old man weeping by Miller's grave, wondering, has he done enough? Has he earned the sacrifice that was paid for him? And he turns to his wife and he says, tell me I'm a good man. Have I good? And the miller's dying words have almost become a curse, because they've given Ryan this burden that he's had to live up to for the whole of his life. Have I done enough to earn the sacrifice? So I contrast that with Jesus's dying words on the cross. It is finished. It is finished. There's no more to do. I've done everything. Now I'm offering you a gift, and you can live out of the gift and live in freedom, live the fullness of life that I came to give. And it's just the contrast between those two things. So I'm forever seeing things like that and making links and thinking, well, how can I say something about the gospel? So the familiar thing is kind of the hook to get people interested, and then just use that to kind of segue into something about the good news of Jesus. So almost every day I'm looking at things, and so when I say I have to kind of jot them down immediately, otherwise I forget, or I'm often texting myself with an idea. The goal of them is to introduce people to Jesus. They're kind of evangelistic, they're apologetic, they're easily accessible, they're easy to read. I often get feedback to say that they kind of connect where other tracts don't, because they're books of just books of stories. So my aim is just to get them into the hands of as many people as possible, to help them think about life, think about eternal life, think about the deep questions of life. As I say, everyone has those moments where they think there must be more to life than this, but then they don't know where to go with that. And people are searching all the time for something that means something, and something that gives them significance, and people are searching for their identity. So the aim of all of the books is very simple, really. It's to introduce people to Jesus as their as their saviour, as someone who promised life in all its fullness, and just try and get over the prejudice that people have and the misconceptions that people have. So it's a very simple aim, and the books all have the same aim. It's just to make it as... I have this thing when I was leading churches. I had this thing that what we're about is we want to make it as easy as possible for people to encounter Jesus. So that was the lens through which we looked at every activity we did as a church. I'd always be thinking, is this making it easier or harder for someone to encounter Jesus? And I guess my aim with the books is to make it easier for people to encounter Jesus. I heard about you through, it was a Facebook post. I think I saw, so it was a Facebook post just introducing yourselves and saying what you did, and I'm always looking for different ways of getting the books into people's hands. So I responded to your Facebook post, and it's been very fruitful. So I'm very grateful for you for posting on Facebook and making me aware of your existence.